Hello, my name is Derek Devine. I'm the International Business Development Manager for Edmentum International. Thanks for taking the time to download this webinar, How to Achieve Personalized Learning for All Abilities. I think firstly what we need to do is just tell you a little bit about Edmentum International, who we are, a little bit about myself, and then we'll get into everything that we've covered across the presentation itself. So, our commitments as an organisation and our approach to assessment, instruction and data lay at the foundation for how we define and support personalised learning. Edmentum has really grown as technology has developed over time. We were at the forefront of technology in the 1960s with Plato courseware. Maybe some of you have heard of Plato courseware. It's actually still around today. It's been developed year on year. In the early 2000s with Study Island, Education City, and more recently with a solution we've created called ExactPath, and I'll talk a little bit about ExactPath as we get to the end of the presentation. But really we're committed to making it easier for educators to individualize learning for every student. That's at the center of everything that we do. And we're really an international company. We have offices in the United States, we have offices in the UK, we work with nearly 1 million teachers across 80 different countries. So when I say we're an international company, we really are. Just about myself, a little bit about my background. I've spent the last nearly 6 years, I think at this stage, working directly with international schools on a number of different areas. So things like assessment for learning, technology in the classroom, how to establish blended learning in the classroom. But one of the key topics that always comes up when I'm running workshops, when I'm visiting schools, or just from speaking to educators at the various conferences that we attend, the topic always comes up around personalized learning. How can we personalize learning for all of our students? It's something that I think educators, teachers in particular, find a real challenge. So what we're going to try and do over the next 20 minutes or so, try and keep the webinar to about 20 minutes, we're going to just discuss some of the challenges that educators come across, and then we're going to look at how we can overcome those challenges. So what can we do in order to personalize learning in the classroom? So I think we need to begin by firstly looking at what personalized learning is. So let's discuss what is personalized learning. Now, we've put a lot of thought into how best to define personalized learning. It's one of those buzzword phrases that it's become popular almost to the point of ambiguity, I think, at this stage. Everybody seems to have their own interpretation of what it is. But I think it's most powerful when it's kept simple. Okay? Personalized learning is all about putting students in the driver's seat. I think we can all agree on that. It's an approach guided by innovative teaching and supported by tools that pace learning to students' needs, tailor instruction to student preferences, and align education to student interests. And that's where we have these three elements coming together. Individualized learning, that's pacing learning at a student's needs. Differentiated learning, tailoring learning to student preferences and goals. And then linking that in with student agency. I think those three elements really add up to personalized learning. So if we think of personalized learning maybe as an umbrella, an individualized and differentiated learning both fit in under that umbrella. That maybe simplifies it a little bit. Now, we've defined what personalized learning is, or I've given my definition of what I think personalized learning is. Some people might define it in a different way, but I think it's really important to establish and understand the goals of personalized learning and why these goals are really important. If I asked you what your goals are for personalized learning, you'd probably give me different answers. And I know that because I've asked the question of teachers when I've been out working in schools. So I've often got a whole range of different responses when we've talked about what are the goals for personalized learning in your school. But I believe the primary goals of personalized learning center around these three key concepts. Number one, ensure equity. What do I mean by that? That means being fair and impartial for each of your students. All students should have learning opportunities catered to their individual needs. Number two, raise achievement. Okay, that's something I think that's important to all schools, something that we're constantly looking at. How can we measure students' progress? So it's incorporating data and driving towards specific goals to make real progress. And I think that's something that all schools do. We're all doing different benchmark tests, end of year assessments, end of term assessments, end of key stage assessments. But a really important goal of personalized learning is trying to raise achievement. And then lastly, we want to inspire student agency. What this means is it gives your students a sense of purpose to take real ownership of their learning experience and understand both where they are and where they're going. Okay, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we move through the presentation. But that's something that's really important. Inspiring student agencies, allowing students to take ownership of their own learning. Now, I talked a little bit about the fact that I've spent time working with different schools over the last 5-6 years. And as I've worked with schools and we've talked about personalized learning in the classroom, there's a selection. This is really just a selection of some of the challenges that educators have put to me in terms of trying to put a personalized learning or trying to create a personalized learning plan for themselves. Things like, how do I find time to personalized learning? How do I determine students' strengths and weaknesses? There's so much data available. How do we use that data? How does that data have a real effect in terms of what we're doing in the classroom? Now, actually, I think that some of the answers to these questions come from the various data sets that we have in place. But the problem is that we're actually in a position now, we've got so much data available to us that it's actually becoming a real challenge, not only to understand what that data means, what it represents, but for our teachers to try and understand and incorporate that data into the classroom so it has a positive effect. That is becoming one of the real challenges for international schools. And I know because I've spent the last 4 or 5 years working specifically with schools on assessments. Schools are running data assessments every week. But actually, if they don't understand what that data means, it's not going to have an effect on what they're doing in the classroom. So what we've tried to do is take all this information, so take elements of conversations that we've had with various educators over the last number of years and try to put together an effective learning or personalized learning plan that teachers or educators can follow within the school. So I think in order to personalize learning in the classroom, what we need to do is we need to create a plan for our students. And this can be done in 6 essential steps. Now, you might look at this and think, well, many of these steps are not new, they're not revolutionary, but I believe when they're paired together and captured in a plan, they support the components that make up the larger educational movement of personalized learning. But they do it on a really personal, actionable scale that centers around the student experience. And that's what's really important, that all these elements are centered around the individual student themselves. So let's spend a little bit of time just going through some of these elements and how this makes up or can make up an effective personalized learning plan. Number 1, start at your starting point. Okay, we need to define what our starting point is. I think about this step as answering this key question. How do we know where we're going if you're not sure where you've started? This is where assessment data comes into play. This is really your springboard for every step that follows. So we need to use assessment results as a blueprint for our curriculum design. True benchmarks or diagnostic assessments should be valid, reliable, and fair results that you can trust. Okay, really important. And great assessments provide smart data that doesn't require an interpreter. Probably most important of all, there's so many schools that are using different various assessments, but actually the teachers in the classroom don't understand what that data means. And it's not having a positive effect on what you're doing in the classroom. It's not affecting how you teach your students. So understanding or making sure that the correct assessment is in place is a really important starting point. Okay, so setting those benchmarks, but not only benchmarking, understanding what that data means. And then we move on to setting goals. So as adults, I think goal setting is something that we already know how to do. It's something that the majority of us build into our everyday lives. We might have daily, weekly, or even yearly goals. that we would like to achieve, but it's not necessarily something that comes easy for students. I'll give you a personal example. Even though I grew up by the seaside in a small town in the east coast of Ireland, I never learned how to swim. So last year I set myself a goal of learning how to swim over 6 to 8 months. But that's something that I think we do for ourselves more and more. We set goals or challenges for ourselves. It's not necessarily something that students do for themselves. I know and I remember when I was in school, it was always something that my teachers would do for me. They would tell me what I need to achieve within my class. They would tell me what I need to achieve by the end of term, by the end of the academic year. I didn't decide that for myself. That was decided for me. And I think goal setting is a learned skill that really can help you, that we really should be helping our students see the power of. We need to make it a conversation and ask students to ask questions that help our students arrive at the goals they want to achieve. We should be asking these questions of our students. Do our students understand what their strengths and abilities are? What are the areas they'd like to improve? How are we going to measure their growth and success? These are the type of questions I asked myself when I was learning how to swim. But do students actually ask themselves these questions, or are we telling them the answers? I think that's really important. Students need to be able to set their own goals, because that's really going to help them to achieve their goals. If they're really bought into what they're doing, they understand their strengths, possible weaknesses, areas they need to improve in, and they understand how they're going to be measured over the academic year. Next, we're looking at map learning and interests. Finding and taking the time necessary to get a pulse of our students. I mean, we possibly see that as a bit of a luxury, because how many students have we got in a class? How many classes are we teaching? But it's something that I think is really worth the effort. As we get to know our students, we need to record their respective preferences, their interests, their talents. We need to ask questions to find out what makes them tick. We need to understand our learners better, because that's going to help us when we're developing learning plans, lesson plans. If we understand our learner preferences, so if we understand what type of learners we have, do we have spatial learners, visual learners, what their interests are, what areas do they really struggle in, that will help us to develop learning plans for students. And it's something that I'm going to feed into a little bit more later on when I talk about some of the solutions that we offer at Edmentum. Things like Exact Path, where we're able to provide areas that students can really focus on based on their individual learner needs. So based on the type of learner that they are, we're able to design areas of curriculum that they can really focus on to help them exceed. But I think I love this, I don't think I know, I love this quote from Sheryl Sandberg. It really sums up, I think, the importance of student interests and how it can drive larger goals. That's a really key area. Understanding our students better, taking the time to understand our students, really feeds into building an actionable, personalized learning plan. And then we go on to teaching students to track and focus. No matter what age, even as young as kindergarten, students can begin to track their own progress. Now, that can look different for everybody. As you're thinking about the right tracking tools for students, or thinking about what type of tracking tools we want to incorporate, we need to define what it is we're going to track. Is it mastery, test scores, reading level growth? What areas are we looking to track? And once we figure that out, we need to make sure that our tracking criteria, or sorry, our trackers meet the 4 elements of criteria I've marked out. So firstly, it needs to be easily updated, online or by hand. It needs to be visually consumable. It needs to be reflective of progress over time. And it needs to be capable of highlighting learner goals. Really important. But also, it's not really enough just to track. We need to help our students learn how to distinguish their next steps towards success. So essentially, show them how to read the data and verbalize it. We talked a little bit earlier on about how important it is to have simple data that's actionable. not only for yourself to interpret it, but for students as well. Students need to be able to interpret that data as well. And students, these four elements really help students to verbalize focus areas. So identifying that starting point, benchmarking, know where we're going, what are our goals, what goals have we set out, how are we going to achieve them, determine our next steps, what steps are we going to take to achieve those goals, and then understanding the outcome. When we achieve those goals, what is the outcome going to be at the end of that? And then we look at assessments for learning. So we've all heard about the benefits of incorporating recurring check-ins and benchmarks to plot critical student growth points. And I think it's something that we do in every school. Benchmark tests, we could have end of key stage tests, end of year tests, end of term tests. So we're constantly benchmarking. But to help understand the data of those assessments, we really need to look carefully at the differences between progress and achievement. So students can be making tremendous progress and not necessarily meet achievement goals. It's so vitally important that we keep these two elements in perspective, because that's going to help encourage perseverance for students, helps them to persevere towards their achievement goals, understanding the difference between progress and achievement. And I think oftentimes they almost come construed into one. Students really need to, if we don't have achievable goals, then no matter what progress a student is making, they may get disinterested, it may have a negative effect, it may affect their well-being. We really need to understand the difference between progress and achievement. And if a student is making effective progress, it should be towards an achievable goal. And I think that's something we all understand. And then lastly, in terms of this element of building a personalized learning plan, all this information really needs to be shared. We shouldn't be keeping progress or setbacks a secret. I think it goes without saying that this process, building a personalized learning plan for our students, it's one that's done in partnership. A student-to-teacher partnership also includes other partners as well. Student peers, whether that's classmates who are going to support them, parents or siblings, often your students' biggest cheerleaders, coaches or advisors, and they could be role models, football coaches, swimming coaches, or other teachers especially, so other instructional leaders. Everybody needs to be included in this process along the way. Understand where a student is progressing, what they're doing really well in, but also what areas they may be struggling in. So everyone can feed into this personalized learning plan to make sure it has a positive effect. Now, along the personalized learning journey, there's bound to be points where you want to reevaluate and frame new goals. I think that's common sense. Anything can happen in a student's life. Something could happen outside of school. Something can happen inside school, that has a positive or negative effect on that student. It's really important that we revisit each of these steps as needed, as a way to reflect the appropriate goals and student needs. So we need to go back and look at this process, look at the learning plan to make sure it's still as we want it to be. It's still going to have a positive effect. And if we need to change it, we can go back and change it over time. But building a personalized learning plan for each of our students, following these 6 key essential steps, I think is a really good start in terms of being able to help our students. Now, what I've tried to do is take these essential steps. So what we've tried to do at Edmentum is take these essential steps that we've just discussed and put them into an effective working model, something that visually makes it easy to understand in terms of what we're doing. And it all starts with the student. So the student is, in this model, is in the driver's seat, guiding the learning process. Learning, like we've talked about earlier on, learning should be paced to their needs, should be tailored to their preference and aligned to their interests and goals. But we all know that this can't be possible without innovative teaching. And this is why it's so critical that there are talented, resourceful, empathetic educators that are guiding this process. And that's invaluable. Even the student is the center of this, but we have to have innovative teaching around it. And there's several other layers that key into that. I'll talk a little bit about a couple of them. We've discussed some of these already, but this just, I think, is a really good visual guide of what personalized learning is, something that's really easy to follow, and it helps you then referring to this guide as you go through your 6 essential steps. So things like progress checks. Don't just ask what's next, know what's next, okay? So collecting frequent data points that reflect student growth, that this can help educators to celebrate progress, but also pinpoint where additional help may be needed. And I think we all understand that. Partnerships, just talked about. It takes a village of parents, siblings, teachers, and other stakeholders working in tandem to help students to meet their learning goals. Really, really important. One-on-one interactions. Remember, you know your students best, and the insights that can be picked up from just a few minutes spent working with one-on-one with a student are really, truly invaluable. We know, and I've talked about this already in terms of this presentation, the amount of data that's available to us, data that's giving us, in some cases, really valuable information about our students. But always remember, you know your students best. That data should feed into what you already know. And in some cases, you should be challenging that data because you know your students best. And there's other areas like self-paced curriculum. You need to have faith in the curriculum, the materials that you have in place. Around the clock access anytime, anywhere. What this essentially means, it's more than just going digital. It entails providing learning tools with proven usability success and in product support that ensures students can be successful no matter where they choose to learn. We all know, I think, that education is not just tied to a fixed location. The concept of 21st century learning implies flexibility, so students, that basically suits what the students' needs are. So whether students are at home or at school, a personalized approach to learning should be happening everywhere that learning occurs. So whether that's in the classroom, or whether it's at home, or whether it's out when they're have extra activities after school, learning occurs everywhere. And part of that should feed into your personalized learning plan. So I hope you find that an effective model just to feed into your personalized learning plan. And I think that brings us towards the end of the presentation. What I will very quickly want to bring you through is just an insight into one of the solutions that we provide, that we've been working with schools, particularly in the UAE, over the last year or so. It's one of our newer solutions. Because we spent so much time working with schools on personalized learning and understanding the challenges that schools face, what we've tried to do is come up with what we have effectively done is come up with a solution that helps schools to personalize learning in the classroom. It feeds into elements like intervention, individualized learning, supporting students with maybe ELL. It's called Exact Path, and it really propels personalized solutions. What it effectively does is it moves learning forward. It works in partnership with schools who possibly have your own assessment data in place already. So we partner up with companies like NWEA assessment or map testing. We use those scores to basically interpret what that data means and create an individualized learning path for you. And what this we found has really helped schools, and what's really helped teachers with, is instead of spending time trying to understand what data means or how that data should have an effect on what we're doing, we interpret that data for you. So you import that data into our Exact Path system, and from that data, we build an individualized learning path for our students, or for your students. So you don't have to spend that time driving through pages and pages of data and then building a plan based on that data. We do that work for you. So we interpret that data and we build an individualized learning path for each individual student, no matter what their needs are. So whether they're gifted and talented students, maybe they're struggling in a particular area, we build out a learning path that has curriculum content designed based on their needs. And they can then work through that content day by day or week by week in order to progress. So we're effectively building a personalized learning plan for you. Some of the elements that we've already discussed are keyed into the software to help you to spend more time teaching. It helps by grouping students for you. So like I said, if you've got gifted and talented students in a classroom, it groups those students together, and then it builds a design based on their individual needs. If you have to work with students who may be struggling with one particular concept, you can do that and allow your gifted and talented students to go ahead and work. Or if you've designed something that you want your gifted and talented students to work on, and you want your students who may be struggling with a particular concept, they can then log in and work online on that particular concept to help them to catch up with other students. So it personalizes the content for each individual student based on their needs. And then, like I've already mentioned earlier on, really, really important that the data available to you is smart data. Analyzes performance, measures growth, measures progress, and is really easily available to you and really easy to understand. And that's something that I think has been key to how schools have used ExactPath over the last year or two. And we've had some really good successful stories about how schools have incorporated data that they already have in place. Or if you don't have an assessment in place, you can actually use the assessments that we've built into our ExactPath tool. But I just really wanted to touch on that just to give you an example of some of the tools that we currently use and supply schools with. And I mentioned earlier on that we do partner up with different assessment companies. So assessment companies like MAP or NWEA or Renaissance Learning, we work with these companies to be able to interpret their data for you and build that individualized learning path for your students. So if you want to hear a little bit more about that, please do get in touch with me. My email address is on screen, derek.devine@edmentum.com, or also please visit our website, www.edmentuminternational.com. We have a whole range of different support tools in place. We have different webinars. We have actual personalized learning drafts. I've covered 6 key elements in the presentation today, but actually there's 10 that we have in a document, a workable document that you're able to input into if you want to develop your own personalized learning plans for your students. We have them available for you to download on the website. Or if you're interested, maybe discussing a little bit more what I've gone through today, or looking at or interested in talking about some of the tools that we have available, please do send me an email, let me know, and I'll follow up directly with you. Thanks again for taking the time to listen to this webinar. Hope you found it useful. And like I said, please do get in touch. I'd love to hear some feedback from you.